Hello everyone, I'm Lao Gao. Recently we discussed Kisaragi Station. Many viewers commented wanting more urban legends, so today I'll share an even scarier one, Little Bird Star. This urban legend emerged a year after the Kisaragi Station urban legend, specifically on June 6, 2005. It was on a forum where someone posted, asking people to share terrifying experiences they had encountered. In the 912th comment of that post, a message appeared that later became a legendary urban myth in Japan known as Kotori Village. The person who left this comment had the username Xiaoxiang. He mentioned that he himself does not have any sensitivity to spiritual matters and has no particular connection with the supernatural or paranormal events. However, last month he encountered a very terrifying event. He mentioned that he has a friend who is about the same age as him, and they have been playing together since childhood. Now both of them are almost 30. This friend of his comes from a family that runs a very large local shrine, essentially a child of a shrine family. As we have explained before, in Japan, monks, priests, and Taoists can get married. Moreover, these families often manage their temples and shrines for generations. His friend's family runs a shrine, and they have been doing so for over 100 years. His friend's father is currently the head priest of the shrine, so moving forward, we'll refer to his friend as Little God to help everyone remember who he is. Since this story involves several people, it might get confusing if we don't give them names. As I mentioned earlier, the main poster is called Little Fragrance, as he wrote his name as such, and his friend, the child of the shrine family, will be called Little God. Let's call him Little God. Although he is said to inherit the shrine in the future, he is not the head priest yet, so he usually has a regular job, but during holidays or when there are many festival activities, he helps out at home. He also performs some rituals, having learned these skills. Now, returning to the day of the incident last month, the host, Little Xiang, invited his friend Little God to his home. Little God came along with his girlfriend, and the host also invited another girl separately. She is a mutual acquaintance of theirs, a girl with whom they all spent their childhood playing, but she was delayed that day. So, at home, it was just Xiaoxiang, Xiaoshen, and Xiaoshen's girlfriend waiting for her arrival. After some time, the girl who was delayed called the host to provide an explanation for her tardiness. It was because earlier in the afternoon, while tidying up the warehouse at her home, she discovered a small wooden box. This box appeared quite ancient and was intricately crafted, but no matter how hard they attempted, they couldn't manage to open it. Her entire family was unaware of the box's origin, and they were all trying to figure out how to unlock it. On the phone, she said to Xiaoxiang, "Hey, aren't you good at opening things like this? I'll bring it over for you to take a look." After saying that, she hung up the phone. About 40 minutes later, the girl drove to Xiaoxiang's house with the small wooden box. At this point, let's give this girl a name. Since she was late, we'll call her Xiaoqi. As soon as her car entered the parking lot, something happened. Xiaoshen inside the house suddenly became uneasy. Little Shen suddenly sensed something unusual, like a spirit or malevolent entity approaching, making him very nervous. The host, knowing him since childhood, was aware of his sensitivity to the supernatural, and quickly asked if he sensed anything. At this point, they were still unaware that Xiaoqi had reached the parking lot, and those inside were feeling anxious, unsure about what was happening. When they sensed a bit of an ominous force, Xiaoqi carried the small wooden box upstairs. Xiaoshen inquired of the girl, "What have you brought?" Xiaoqi replied, "Oh, we discovered this small wooden box at home. It's quite intriguing, but we are unable to open it." Upon seeing the box, Xiaoshen's face suddenly turned pale and he cautioned, "Do not touch it." After expressing that, he swiftly turned around and hurried to the restroom to vomit. At that particular moment, I was completely unaware of what had transpired and simply stood there pondering what might be wrong with the small box. Once he was done, the little deity promptly began calling home, and I overheard a conversation between him and his father. The little deity said, "Dad, something's amiss. My friend brought a small avian box." Then he seemed to describe the box to the other side, saying, "I only observed this box with a marking on it, but I couldn't comprehend it. I witnessed something enter my friend's stomach, and it had a tail-like formation. There is a triangle inside, that's definitely correct, but I can't manage to say some of these strange words." The contributor mentioned that these words contained a lot of technical terms that he couldn't understand, so he only wrote down the parts he could comprehend. In the end, Xiaoshen said to the person on the phone, "I understand, I'll give it a try. If I can't do it, you handle it." After saying this, he hung up the phone. After hanging up, Xiaoshen knelt in front of the small box, composed himself, and then said to the host, "Give me a knife." The host promptly fetched a knife for him. Upon receiving the knife, he made an incision on his finger, causing blood to begin trickling. He subsequently positioned his finger into the nearby small basin and brought the diminutive box towards the girl's mouth. The young girl was unaware of what was transpiring, and Xiaochen instructed, "Consume my blood." The girl appeared to be drinking it with evident discomfort. Subsequently, Xiaoshen commenced chanting something that resembled an incantation, repeating it approximately 5 or 6 times before withdrawing his finger. The girl then expelled a substantial amount of revolting material, including numerous blood red and clumped black substances. Afterwards, Xiaochen remarked, "It's perfectly all right, it's perfectly all right." After uttering these words, he placed his hand firmly onto the wooden box. The box measured approximately 20 centimeters on each side, not particularly large. He placed his hand onto the box and utilized the towel to secure his hand to the box, then stated, "Take me home." as he informed the host. The host was uncertain about what was occurring, but since he had grown up with this little deity and was aware of what his family did for a living, he didn't question much or dare to inquire. Then they took these people home. After sending them home, the narrator calmed down and went to sleep that day. However, the next day, he felt that something was a bit strange and wanted to find out what exactly had happened. So he tried to contact Xiaoshen but couldn't reach him. He heard that Xiaoshen had fallen ill, and it was about 8 days later that he saw Xiaoshen again. Xiaoshen told him that this thing was actually an evil object containing a curse. His family had dealt with many of them, so he knew what it was. After Xiaoqi returned home, he also asked his parents about this thing since it came from their house, but his parents didn't know either. The mystery surrounding the small bird box was ultimately revealed by the Koiki family's neighbor. This diminutive bird box is in fact an antique artifact. It was crafted sometime during the period spanning from the late 1860s to the early 1880s. This era aligns with the Meiji Restoration in Japan, a transformative time when the nation shifted from the Edo period to the Meiji era, characterized by widespread national upheaval with rebellions and revolutions occurring throughout the land. Naturally, the authorities across Japan could not permit these rebellions and revolutions to happen without restraint, so they enforced harsh suppression and stringent control over the populace. The measure was to execute anyone causing trouble without question. Even if you didn't cause trouble, you would still be strictly controlled. This control was hierarchical, meaning the county managed the city managed the town, and the town managed the village. The village was the lowest level and faced the most oppression and control. Here, I need to explain that in Japan, a county is larger than a city, so the order is county, city, town, and then village. As the lowest level villages, they were constantly oppressed by the town, leading to a very miserable living condition. They often couldn't get enough to eat and were at risk of starving to death. They couldn't leave the village because of the control. Without enough food, of course, there's no way to start a rebellion. The purpose was indeed to make it difficult for the common people to revolt. What many might not know is that for a long period in Japanese history, there was a system similar to the caste system in India. People were divided into ranks, and the lowest tier was called untouchables. These untouchables could only do work related to filth, or in other words, they were not even considered human and didn't even have the right to live. These people were called untouchables. Villagers often found themselves in this outcast stage. Of course, there were slightly better off individuals in the village, possibly farmers, but even they didn't have it much better. This was hereditary, meaning a farmer's son would always be a farmer and an outcast's son would always be an outcast, much like the system in India. Due to the particularly harsh living conditions, something would commonly occur, which looking back now seems quite unbelievable. It's called kan'i, with the character for kan and the quotation mark I. Originally, this term was an agricultural term meaning to remove unwanted seedlings. When planting, if the seedlings are too close together, they might compete for nutrients and all die. Therefore, some seedlings need to be removed to ensure that the remaining ones can grow healthily. This process is called kan'i. However, later on, in the particularly impoverished classes in Japan, the term kan'i came to mean. The act of parents killing their own children is not a fictional creation, it is something that has historically occurred. In particularly difficult times, it was relatively common. As people know, there used to be a male-dominated society where the possibility of girls being violated was higher. So if a girl was born, she might be killed immediately, which was a form of suggestion. Another situation, like in Japan, was entirely due to a lack of food. Adults couldn't feed themselves, and at that time there were no effective means of contraception or abortion. The possibility of miscarriage could pose a life-threatening risk to pregnant women, so they would often wait until the child was born and then kill them, which is referred to as infanticide. Infanticide not only involved killing newborns. Some children, who were initially born into families that had enough food, might be killed when they grew to be 7 or 8 years old if the family's conditions suddenly worsened. These are events that have indeed happened. It is something almost unimaginable today, extremely horrifying and particularly prevalent in the lowest social strata. In this narrative, the principal characters, Xiaoxiang, Xiaoshen, and Xiaoqi, belong to families that have resided in this location for numerous generations. This region was initially a village subjected to persecution, characterized by extremely poor living conditions, and their forebears have dwelled here for centuries without ever departing. Then one day, a rebellion erupted in a neighboring area, and the magnitude of the uprising was considerably large, prompting the authorities to dispatch troops to suppress it. The rebels and the suppressors engaged in conflict for quite an extended period, nearly an entire year as it is recounted. Ultimately, the rebellion was subdued. Numerous individuals lost their lives, a significant number were apprehended, and many others managed to escape. Subsequently, one individual found refuge in their village and concealed themselves there. Upon the villagers' realization that someone had sought refuge in their village, what transpired next? They panicked and were very nervous, because if the higher authorities managing their village discovered that a rebel had escaped to their village, they might assume that everyone in the village was involved with the rebellion and everyone could be killed. To prevent this from happening, the villagers decided to eliminate him before he was discovered. The person who escaped to the village, let's call him Lao Tao, said to the villagers, "If you don't kill me, I will teach you how to make a weapon, which is a small box. Once you have it, you can gain freedom, but I can't make it alone. It requires the effort of the entire village. So, if you are willing to spare my life, I will tell you how to make this thing." As for what this box is used for, a villager explained it. After hearing this, the villager said, "Alright, if you teach us how to make this thing, we won't kill you." Then Old Tao said, "I have one more condition. You can make as many of these boxes as you want, but I need to take the first one with me because I can't make it by myself. So you assist me in crafting one, and after I take it away, you are free to create as many as you desire, and it will no longer be associated with me." Once the villagers consented to these two stipulations, Lao Tao instructed them on the process of constructing this intricate small box, which is the bird box we are discussing today. Initially, you must construct a highly intricate wooden box. The specific structure of this wooden box isn't of utmost importance. What truly matters is that once the lid is secured, it can never be reopened. It's somewhat reminiscent of what Luban crafted in the past. Once it's assembled and sealed, it remains perpetually closed. Therefore, prior to sealing this small box, Money, you need to put some things inside and then seal it. What to put in? First, you need to inject the blood of a male animal. The type of animal doesn't matter, as long as it's not human. However, the animal can't be too small. If it's too small, there won't be enough blood to fill the box. Also, the box needs to sit for a week, and the blood inside must not dry out, so the demand for blood is quite high. After filling it with blood and letting it sit for a week, you need to put a few more things inside the box, and then you can seal it. The endeavor to translate was not successful. Subsequently, insert the finger joint within. For youngsters aged between 7 and 10 years, it is sufficient to place merely the initial joint of the finger. For those children exceeding 10 years of age, this box holds no relevance, thus only components from children below 10 can be placed inside. Once the lid is securely closed, the small bird box is considered complete. At this juncture, everyone might ponder what connection this has with birds and why it is referred to as a bird box. In reality, it is not actually called a bird box, it is simply that its pronunciation in Japanese bears a resemblance. It is pronounced similarly to little bird in the Japanese language, known as bug. The authentic designation of this box ought to be kotori bako, and the term kotori is rather uncommon in Japanese. Consequently, the initial impression individuals receive is little bird. Now, what does kotori signify? The ko denotes child, and tori in ancient Japanese pertains to a technique of causing someone to endure suffering and perish through an evil spirit. Or a method of cursing someone to a painful death is called taking kill. So, taking child refers to a method of using sorcery to torment a child to death, and taking child box is a small box specifically used to kill children. Of course, it doesn't refer to physically killing a child, but rather through sorcery. With this small box, a child would die. Hearing it this way, the name of the box sounds quite terrifying, doesn't it? It doesn't sound as cute as a little bird box. Thus, this child retrieval box I previously mentioned involves placing parts of deceased children's bodies inside, and the quantity of children placed within determines the box's specific level. If you insert one child's body part, this compact box is referred to as one seal. Although the precise characters are not known, it is speculated to be the seal of sealing. If you insert 2 children, it is termed 2 seals, followed by 3 seals, 4 seals, 5 seals, and 6 seals. According to Old Tao, a small box can hold up to 8 children's body parts. This type of box is not called 8 wind, but 8 kai. 1 wind, 2 wind, 3 wind, 4 wind, 5 wind, 6 wind, 7 wind, and 8 kai. The larger the number, the stronger its effect, and the more potent and apparent its curse ability will be. So when Old Tao requested the creation of this Zikuxiang, he asked for markings to be made on it, so it could be identified from the outside as either 1 feng or 8 kai. Otherwise, once you complete one, you wouldn't be aware of the exact number of children contained within, correct? Since the creation of this box necessitates utilizing numerous deceased children, Old Tao himself was unable to craft it. He had the villagers construct one on his behalf. The initial one was crafted for Old Tao, and he informed the villagers that they were not permitted to create a second one. They could only produce up to 7. Upon receiving the first one, since it was merely Old Tao's assertion, the villagers requested him to provide a demonstration. Its genuine effect. Subsequently, Old Tao stated, "If you desire to witness the effect, you must provide me with a woman and a child, and I shall demonstrate it to you." The villagers found themselves in quite a predicament, because if this object truly functioned as claimed, it would result in the deaths of both the child and the woman. Consequently, the villagers convened a meeting to deliberate on who should be selected for this experiment. After some thoughtful consideration, they ultimately provided Old Tao with a woman and a child. Old Tao subsequently positioned the open small box in the center of the ground, and the effect of this object immediately astounded the villagers. As soon as the woman and child approached the box, they both died, and their deaths were very painful. It was later discovered that they died from ruptured internal organs. Just by approaching the box without even touching it, their organs would burst, leading to death. After witnessing this effect, the villagers believed there was indeed some witchcraft involved in this item, so they began to make their own boxes, and Old Tao left the village with his belongings. Before leaving, however, he also told the villagers how to store the box and how to eventually dispose of it. If there comes a day when you no longer need these boxes, how should you dispose of them? Lao Tao said that when not in use, the box should be kept in a dark and damp place, and women and children must not go near it. As long as it is not approached, it poses no harm, but once someone gets close, no one can save them. The effectiveness of these boxes will gradually weaken over time. We know the effectiveness is very weak, so when it becomes very weak, you can dispose of these boxes by taking them to a local shrine. He said the people at the shrine know how to handle this thing. Give it to them, and they will take care of it. After stating this, Old Tao departed with his possessions, and the villagers commenced crafting their initial item, a chiffon, which they subsequently presented as a gift to a wealthy landlord who had been oppressing and suppressing them. Shortly thereafter, it was reported that the women and children in the landlord's household had all perished. Consequently, the villagers swiftly disseminated the information that they now possess some small boxes imbued with malevolent powers. Therefore, if you do not wish to end up like them, if you don't want to end up like this family, don't disturb the peace of our village. No one should come near, and the town should return the small box sent to the wealthy family. After seeing that the women and children in the wealthy family had all died, the town immediately sent someone to return the box. From then on, no one dared to approach the village. In the eyes of the town, these villagers were just lowly people. They could live or die as they wished. The townspeople saw no need to engage with the villagers, so they left the village alone. They let the village fend for itself, and since then, the village did indeed lead a somewhat more peaceful life. However, to be on the safe side, the villagers continued to make these items. In the end, it took 13 years to make a total of 16 of them, which included 6 of the first kind, 2 of the second kind, 6 of the fifth kind, and 3 of the seventh kind. Some people might find it a bit strange, wondering why they made so many of the first kind and not all of them as the most powerful kind. The reason is actually quite simple, because making one requires sacrificing some children. The easiest to make is the 1 seal, while the 7th seal is the hardest, requiring at least 7 children. So in some years they might have only made a few 1 seals. Initially, however, they did make several 7 seals. That's the feeling. Now another question is why they kept making these things, right? Even though they had achieved a certain level of peace, it's because, as I mentioned earlier, these things have a certain shelf life. So every several years they might find it necessary to craft another one to ensure they consistently possess a weapon for resistance. This particular item cannot be created instantaneously, so they must prepare it well in advance. Well, the village experienced tranquility for 13 years until an unfortunate incident occurred. A mischievous young boy, while the adults were not paying attention, ventured to the location where these small boxes were stored. They typically weren't utilized, correct? So in a somewhat secluded area of the village, there was this young boy. He sneaked to that spot and grabbed a box. He might not have fully grasped what he'd heard about it, but he ended up taking a chiffon. After bringing it home, all the kids in his family, including himself and the women, died. After this tragic event, the villagers began to think, realizing that keeping this object in our village is indeed very dangerous. It's like having a nuclear weapon. While it can be used to scare others or exert power, it's still extremely risky to keep it. But if we keep holding on to this thing and one day it explodes or gets stolen, it would be quite dangerous. So they wanted to dispose of these boxes, thinking there's no need to keep so many. Then they remembered what Old Tao had told them, that if they wanted to dispose of it, they should take it to the shrine. The shrine took a look at the small box and said that it was indeed an evil object, but its malevolence was too strong for them to handle. They knew how to deal with it, but given the current circumstances, they couldn't do it. We can only begin addressing the issue when its power has nearly diminished to its absolute lowest point, so the villagers were instructed to retrieve it. Now, how can we effectively reduce its potency? The sole method is through the passage of time. Consequently, the villagers deliberated and expressed that they do not wish for this object to become lost, nor do they desire for it to spread to other locations. They acknowledge their responsibility to retain it, yet no one is eager to take on the task of caring for it. What course of action should we take? In our village, it is primarily the affluent families who are capable, as they possess better conditions. Indeed, they have additional rooms or manpower to oversee these matters. So we decided that these prominent families, about 5 of them, would take turns safeguarding the box. How long does one person keep it? For a lifetime. For instance, the first family is responsible for the box, and once that family passes away, the box is then transferred to the second family. After the second family passes away, it is transferred to the third family. In this manner, after a cycle or two, over 100 years, the item may lose its power. How effective is this item? Actually, before Lao Tao left, he mentioned to them that because before he left, they made an octavo that Lao Tao took with him. They made another chiffon, and Lao Tao mentioned it has a 140-year efficacy, but he left without disclosing the efficacy of the others. Actually, Old Tao was also mentioned in their conversation, saying that he secretly escaped, so before understanding all the details, he was already gone. He only knew that the effectiveness of the chiffon was about 140 years. So if we deduce logically, each seal lasts about 20 years, right? 1 seal for 20 years, 2 seals for 40 years, up to 7 seals for 140 years, and 8 seals would be approximately 160 years. This box was likely made around the 1860s to 1880s. Calculating from 1880, 140 years would be exactly until 2020, so all the chiffons should have expired before 2020, theoretically leaving no cause for concern. However, this post was made in 2005, and at the beginning of the film, I mentioned that the small box Koike brought to the host's house was a chiffon, which still had a little bit of efficacy left. So the entire process was essentially a sealing process. After reaching the temple, the priest would completely seal it. So why did this artifact appear in the warehouse of the Ishii family? It's actually due to the rotation of custody. It was the turn of the Koike family to keep it, but technically it should have been the responsibility of Koike's neighbor. This is because Koike's grandfather passed away that year, and before his death, he did not pass on this responsibility. It wasn't clearly communicated to his son, which is Koike's father, so Koike's father didn't know about this thing. However, Koike's family's neighbor, who was also an elderly man, did know about it. Logically speaking, the neighbor should have taken over this responsibility, but he didn't want to. Since no one else knew about it, he thought it was fine to just leave it at Koike's house. As a result, Koike's family discovered that the house was quite old, especially the warehouse, which had been there for a long time. They didn't know what was inside since the grandfather was no longer around, so they decided to prepare to dismantle the warehouse. When they were about to demolish it, the neighbor realized something was off and got involved in the matter, uncovering the whole truth. That's how the process went. Now, I mentioned there are 3 chifeng, right? Where are the remaining 2? It seems the shrine's priest handled those 2, so all 3 chifeng should be sealed. The above is a particularly popular urban legend on the Japanese internet in 2005 called the Bird Box, but actually named the Purple Box. It's unclear if this is true. The original poster said they're from Shimane Prefecture in Japan, a mystical place. In Japanese mythology, it's where gods first descended. In the film about Kisaragi Station, it's mentioned that in the Japanese lunar calendar, October is Kanazuki, meaning no gods are in Japan. But the gods gather in Shimane. There, October is Kamyarizuki, meaning it's the only place with gods. It's quite mystical. After the author finished writing this post, they disappeared from the internet and didn't continue to hype the matter. However, netizens kept exploring the possibilities within and connecting it with some historical events in Japan, which are indeed true and involved some terrifying incidents during those times. From the author's description of the creation process of this Codibo box, it actually resembles what we previously discussed about drums, right? Making a drum involves placing some spiritually significant living things into a sealed container, which then forms a drum. This object is somewhat analogous in that it encompasses blood and certain parts of children's bodies. Although it does not involve placing animals to combat and ultimately form a drum, it could be considered a very unique type of drum because there is something developing within it. What is developing? Bacteria and viruses, correct? Human blood indeed contains some bacteria and viruses, and if these entities multiply within the nutrients of the blood, it is possible to produce a major pathogen, and these viruses come from the human body, so they are particularly easy to infect people. Therefore, its theoretical effectiveness might be that it can spread some plagues, but why is it only effective on women and children? This is not very clear, and it may be an exaggeration because in that era, women and children might have been physically weaker, making them more susceptible to diseases, which appeared to target women and children. If you consider it from a rational perspective, you can sense this matter. Probably real, that's all. In describing it, it's often seen as an evil force, but whether it truly exists is still unknown. Until we find solid evidence, it's all speculation. Let's wrap it up for today, and we'll see you next time. Goodbye.